Bubble is a powerful platform where you can build robust, interactive, and data-driven applications all without any code. Yes, even though you're not writing a single line of code, you can create custom functionality like search, editing database records, and so much more. The key to bringing these functions to life is workflows. So join us now as we guide you on how to get started with Bubble workflows for speed and scalability. Workflows are how you can make things happen in your application. Let's take a look at this example here with this sign up form. The user is going to fill out the form, entering their name, email, password, and then they're going to click on this sign up button. Clicking on the button is going to act as a trigger for a workflow so that one or more actions can then run from there. So let's go through some workflow basics by looking at the workflow we have set up for this sign up button. I'm going to switch over to the workflow tab here. So workflow is made up of two parts: an event, right? This is the trigger when the button is clicked, and then the action or multiple actions if necessary. If this happens, then these actions occur. If this, then that. So in this case, if the button sign up is clicked, then we're going to do the following. We're going to sign the user up. This creates the user record in the database. We're going to reset the inputs, which just clears out the inputs so they go back to blank. It gives the user a visual cue that the form is going through. And we're also going to show an alert message to the user. This is another visual cue, let them know that all is well. So we have an alert element designed on the page, which is hidden by default and only going to be shown as a result of that workflow. Okay, now there are different categories for events and many different types of actions that you can add. When you're ready to create a new workflow, you'll click on this box here. You can see these three different categories and you have different triggers, right? Different events that can occur to start a workflow. Some may be kind of automatic for the user. So as soon as the page is loaded, for example, or when the user is detected as being logged out. Some are going to be dependent on an interaction that the user takes with your design. So they may need to click on something, they may need to type something into an input. There's also some custom events that you can create, which we'll talk about in a moment here for a little bit more advanced control over your sequencing. And then once you've added your event, now you can create and build your workflow by adding in actions. So when you go to click and add a new action, you have a big list of actions here. They're organized by these different categories for you to add to the sequence. Now, the most common types of workflows are going to be either a visual change on the page, such as the input reset or showing the alert, and updating your database. Okay, so whether it's creating a record, deleting, modifying, uploading records, things like that. Those are the most common. Now, of course, you have other types of actions, such as, communicating with a third-party service if you have a plugin or an integration of some sort, sending an email, you could be running calculations. There are many different types of categories, but the visual workflows and the database workflows are going to be the ones that come up the most, because for visuals, that's what your user is experiencing. And you want to make sure that, your user always has cues as to whether something has occurred successfully or if there's an error. Some of the elements that appear on the page may need to wait until the user has taken a certain action before they see it. So your control over when they see certain things is all handled through the workflows. And then the database management is at the core of any Bubble application because most features are very data driven. And so users are, constantly modifying records or looking up records to dig into the fields and see the values or perform calculations on them, see them in graphs, whatever it might be. Those are going to be the most common. Now, if you go over to your plugins area of your editor and you install certain plugins, you may get additional workflow capabilities. For example, this is a plugin that's published by Bubble called Draggable Elements, which allows you to create drag and drop interactions in your designs. And you can actually see, once you've installed this plugin, that you have access to more visual elements, but also more another workflow event, right? So this is a trigger, and then another workflow action. If I were to add, let's say, a drag and drop zone, right, a drop area as it's called, and go back over to my workflow and come back here under elements, you can see that now I have this new item added here. And if I go into the actions under, let's see, plugins right here, you can see there is an action called move a draggable group, which we can see was our only action that comes with this plugin. And that has become available to me because I've added a design, an element on my design that's related to this. So be mindful that plugins can actually introduce more workflow capabilities to your application on top of all of the built-in native functionality that Bubble has here. So now what I'm going to do is take you through building out that simple sign-up workflow from scratch. So you can see the different steps involved, the different decisions that you have to make. Now this is a simple workflow, but as you build more complex functionality, you're going to have more decisions to make. You'll have to spend a little bit more time with each action and putting together your sequence. The workflows are generally going to be more involved. And you may even find that there are multiple ways that you can approach a workflow so that you can get the same outcome. Not every approach is necessarily going to be the most performant, so it's really important that you have a good grasp over how workflows can come together and what your options are. This is not an area that you want to rush through. All right, so there's actually two ways to create a workflow from a button click. The first, and I would say is the standard way here, is by starting in the Workflows tab, clicking to add an event, and navigating to Elements, and saying when an element is clicked, then you have to choose your element. In this case, it's my sign up button, and then you can begin adding your actions from there. Nothing wrong with that. That's sort of the kind of fallback. That's always going to be an option for you there. Another way that you can approach starting a workflow, I'm going to delete this here for a second, is at the element itself within the design tab. So with some elements, you're not going to find this with all of them, but with some of them, you're going to see this shortcut button here. This one says add workflow. So when I click on this, it automatically creates that event for me, the right type of event, and also with the appropriate element already selected. So I like to use that as a little shortcut to help myself move through my development a little bit faster. All right. So now that I have my event created, I can start to add my actions. The very first thing that I want to do is to sign up the user. I want to create that user record. So I'm going to go to the sign the user up action. And you can see for this particular action, I have some requirements. I mean, I know that these are required because they're highlighted in red. I can also see that 2 issues have surfaced here in my issue checker, telling me to, make sure that I fill out these 2 fields here. Now, in a lot of actions, you're going to be mapping dynamic values to specific fields or settings, configurations within the action. In this case, I'm creating a user record in my database. So what I want to do is map the email address field to the email field in the user record. Map the password field to the hidden password field in the user record. You don't actually see the password in your data views, but it is there behind the scenes. So when I click here, Bubble is going to present me with a big list of options of where I can find that email value. There's all sorts of different data source options. I also have access to the elements on my page that can produce a value. In this case, I want to access the email inputs value, right? It's the precise input that the user is going to type into. Same thing goes for my password. Now I can also start to type in and filter my options here, right? So I'm looking for the input passwords value, right? Now I've successfully mapped those 2 values to these fields so that when the user record is created, Bubble knows which email and which password to save. Now my user record, let's jump over to our user data type here, also has a custom text field called name. And in my design, I have the user typing in their first name and their last name. So if I wanted to map the names to that name field, I'm going to select change another field within the same action. And you can see now I can change one of my custom fields. In this case, let's do name. And here, just again, I'm going to map my dynamic inputs values to this field. So I'm going to say input first name's value, and I'm going to put my cursor into this box here so that I can type in a space, right? First name, space, and then insert a separate value. In this case, it's going to be my last name, right? So basically the full name is being saved to this field. I, of course, could have created 2 separate fields in my user record, one for first, one for last, and I could have mapped those separately because I can keep going here with more fields. That's, of course, an option to you. All right, so there's our sign up action. So now let's go into the next action I had there, which was a visual change. And this was to reset my inputs. This is under the element actions category. Resetting inputs, all that does is it clears out the values typed in to those inputs in my design that were involved in this workflow. right? So if I typed into email, password, and first and last name, I did reference them here. And so Bubble's going to know, right, those are the inputs to reset. And it's essentially going to take them back to their default states. In this case, the default states of all of these inputs are blank, right? I'm not having these pre-populated with anything. And the only reason I'm adding that is to just give the user a visual cue that once they've clicked the button, the form clears out. That tells them, okay, something has happened. The application is processing my request to sign up. Another visual cue, this is our third action here, is another element action, which is to show our alert message. So being even more obvious for the user and saying, hey, you did it, success, you are now signed up. In reality, after a sign up, I would probably want to maybe navigate them to a different page, or maybe show like a pop-up with more messaging to say, hey, you need to go check your email to go confirm it, or here are some next steps that you can take from here, right? There's a lot of things that you can do as part of a full user onboarding flow, right? But here's another visual cue. So we're showing the alert message that we've designed on the page right now. So let's actually give this a quick preview so that we can see this in action. I'm going to show you here in our database. Let's go to the user table. I currently have 4 users, Rachel, Joey, Ross, and Monica. So let's sign up Chandler. Chandler Bing. Chandler at friends.com, and we'll do a password here, confirm. All right, going to sign up. Click on that button. You saw the progress bar kind of shot across the screen there. Notice that my alert message showed and all of the inputs cleared out. So now going back into my database, you can see there's the new record that showed up automatically. There's the email, the name, first and last in this case, was saved to this field. All right, so there's our workflow, those 3 simple actions to create a user record, capture dynamic information, and help the user understand that everything was successful. Now, part of what's going to contribute to your workflow scalability and speed and just, good performance is your organization behind the scenes. If you are not organized in how you manage your workflow events and actions, how you have things labeled, it can very quickly, very easily lead to errors. That makes your testing harder. That can make things go by without being noticed, and eventually your users run into bugs, and it can just really ripple effect into a series of problems. And there are many features here that you can take advantage of to help yourself stay organized. The first is using folders for your workflow. So if I click here where it says add new folder, let's say I add a new folder called sign up, just like this. And then I add another folder for log in. How about a third one for errors, right? So the purpose of the folders is really to help you filter your events into different sections so that you can keep your space really clear and easy to manage. So this workflow here where it says button sign up, I would place this in the sign up folder. That means, let's add another workflow real quick so we can actually see the difference here. I'm going to create a quick workflow where it says I have an account. And this would essentially switch me over to a login group. So I would probably have some show hide actions to hide my sign up form, show my login form. But I'm going to consider this a login workflow. So I'm going to place it in the login folder. So now if I select the login folder, notice that the sign up workflow got filtered out. If I click on the sign up workflow, the login folders, I said that reverse. If I click on the sign up folder, the login workflow is going to be filtered out. They're just filters. That's all they are. If I were to delete the folder, the workflow doesn't go with it. It's just removing the filter. I can always access all of my workflows by clicking on the unfiltered area here. The second thing you can take advantage of is color coding. So if I go to the sign up workflow here, I can change the event color to green to kind of indicate, a positive interaction. Whereas if I have a workflow, let's create an error-based workflow. This is one of those automatic events. An unhandled error occurs, maybe I want to show a different alert message to say, hey, there's a problem. And I decide that red is going to be my visual indicator for me that this is something negative. The colors don't mean anything other than, they're just a list of color options for you to apply to your own workflows. It's just a color coding or labeling system to help yourself. So there's a handful of colors here for you to choose from. This really does help you keep things organized when you have a large, complex page with dozens and dozens of workflows. I promise the folders and the color coding really does make a difference. Now, another thing that you can do is to be mindful of how you label things. You can actually rename your workflows and your actions to help yourself keep things apart. In some workflow cases, you may have the same type of action. Let's say make a change to one thing and then making a change to another thing, right? In that case, it would be two make a change actions. But, from a kind of a big picture view, you won't really be able to tell the difference if they're modifying the same type of record. So you can come into each action and click on the title here and actually edit this. So you can say, for example, make a change to company user versus make a change to, let's say, guest user, something like that, right? It's just another visual cue for you behind the scenes to keep track of your actions. This is to reduce any errors. So if you ever need to edit something, you don't accidentally make a change to the wrong thing. Note that within these areas where you can edit, this goes for the folders too, you can also include emojis, which I use all the time to help identify things very quickly. So if I open up my emoji editor here, right, I can add emojis to basically call out these workflows or the actions or the events, the folders, anywhere you can edit text, you can insert these, and it helps me find things very easily. Notice that, in the drop-down list here of all of the events and actions, you see them listed alphabetically. You can see the actions indented underneath the event. And again, the labeling and the emojis can really help call attention to things. This makes a huge difference, again, on more complex pages. All of these little shortcuts can really add up and help you move through development faster and more consistently so that you're making fewer errors. Hey, real quick, if you're finding this helpful, take a look at our free extended workshop by going over to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. This is where we'll guide you through our specific 4-phased approach for taking you from idea to app. If you're looking for a complete start to finish guide, you're really going to enjoy this workshop. We've got the link on the screen right now and also in the description below. Now, there are certain features here in the workflows area that can help you stay more efficient with your logic, help you create techniques that keep things more optimized. Now, this is definitely an area where, you're going to have to be creative in some cases. You're going to have to test things out and compare and contrast. Because there's a balance that you need to strike with everything. There's not necessarily a black and white, right or wrong approach to absolutely everything. Some things are a little bit more flexible in terms of how you approach because every single app is different. The key thing to understand here is that you're being efficient with your workload consumption, that the reliability of the function is good, right? That it's consistent, that you're not getting different results every time you run it. That the speed is good, right? And that you're actually getting the outcome that you're looking for. For example, let's say that as a part of this sign-up flow, I also want to create a new account. This is a different data type in my data structure. So I have my user, but I also want to create a new thing called account. Think of this as like a company or an organization, and the person signing up is sort of the admin for that account, okay? So under the account data type, I also have a name field. We're just gonna give the account the same name as the user for now. So we're gonna insert here the current user's name, all right? Now, what I also want to do from here is relate this account back to the user. If we go to our data structure, we can see that the user has a relationship back to its account. And that's what I want to define here. Now that the user exists and the accounts exist, I can go back and update the user to relate the account back to them. So here I'm going to make a change to the current user, okay? And I'm going to modify the field related account to the following: result of step 2. This is an example of an efficiency tactic you can take so that Bubble's not having to do extra work to find that account. Notice that what I'm not doing here is I'm not searching for the account. I could, but it's not as efficient as this shortcut that Bubble is giving me here, where it's basically saying, hey, we already know which account you want because we've just created it. We have a reference to it already. We're sort of holding on to this record kind of in our memory here. And so we don't have to ask Bubble to do an entire database search. Imagine over time with the user base really grown in this application, if we have thousands and thousands of users and thousands of accounts, doing a result of the previous step is much, much more lightweight compared to asking Bubble to search through those thousands of records and potentially applying all sorts of filters to go identify it. Okay, so while we could get the same result either way, this is a much more efficient and more lightweight approach, and it could actually lead to a faster workload completion time because we're not asking Bubble to query a large data set for us. The next feature you can take advantage of is with conditions. Now you can apply conditions at the event level and or at the action level. And conditions are essentially a way for Bubble to check if something is true or not first before moving forward. If the condition passes, right, if the scenario is true, then it will move forward. So for example, sign up is clicked, and only when the email address's value is not empty, then we can move forward with the workflow. Because if they don't have the email, I don't want any of these other actions to run. By adding a condition, I can handle the scenario in which somebody leaves something blank and I don't waste time or waste energy, waste resources and workload units trying to run other functions. This condition is required to be met first. So I could have an alternative workflow. Let's say the element is clicked, right? Here's my sign up button. And if I have the opposite scenario, so if my email inputs value is empty, then what am I going to do here? Well, I can let the user know. I can show that alert message that I have designed on the screen, and I can actually change the alert message here and say email address is required. Right? And in that scenario, we're not wasting any resources or running into any unhandled errors by trying to attempt to run all of these here. Instead, we know exactly what the problem is, and we're going to help the user get out of that problematic situation. So I'm going to actually refresh the page here so you can see what happens. Let me close all of this here. So if I just ran this workflow without filling in the email address, you can see nothing really happens. The alert message, the only thing that's going to show, and it helps the user understand what correction they need to make in order to run the successful flow. Another feature that can help you stay efficient in your workflow logic is to use what's called a custom event. Now, a custom event is a workflow that's triggered by other workflows. So we've modified a couple of things here so that I can show you this example. I have now a login form available, so either the user is signing up or they're logging in. And in the workflows right now, we have our same sign up flow. Sign the user up, we're creating this account, we're resetting inputs and showing a message. And then for the login, we're logging the user in. This is a separate action, also resetting inputs and showing the message. Now, let's say that as a result of both logging in and signing up, I have a big sequence of actions. I want to show an alert, I want to make a change to a specific database record, or I want to send an email, right? It's a sequence that's going to happen as a result of both of these things. Rather than being redundant with my actions and having to set them up twice, I can have both of these workflows funnel into this custom event. So let me name this event success, something like that, okay? So what I'm gonna have in this event is the show alert message. And just to kind of demonstrate, other functions, let's say I also wanted to make a change to the current user. Let's say I'm always going to timestamp the last time they logged in, right? Whether it's on the first sign up or every single time they log in. Let me create a new field here real quick. We're going to call this last login. This is a date. And this last login field is just going to be timestamped with the current date and time, right? I want this every single time they log in or sign up. So 2 actions that always need to run no matter what. So now if I go back into my login flow, I'm going to delete this show message. And what I'm going to do instead is come to the custom event action category and trigger my custom event called success. And I'm going to do the same thing here for sign up. I'm going to remove the show message from there. and instead trigger the custom event called success. Both of these at the end are triggering this sort of consolidated flow. Now this is, again, it's a very simple example, but there are definitely scenarios where you may have a bigger sequence of actions, many different trigger points that all need to funnel into the custom event. And that kind of consolidation can really, not only save you a lot of work, but ensure that you're getting the consistent results you need from all of these different points here, all of these different flows. If you had, separated these same actions into each individual workflow, there's a risk where you could miss something in one of the flows and you get inconsistent results. So custom events are really great for this type of scenario. Another thing you want to be mindful of is your workflow timing. This is the timing of actions running in the sequence. This can make a really big difference. If things are not timed properly, you could have very different outcomes. And Bubble's default behavior is to run everything at the same time as much as it possibly can. And while that could be good for speed, again, it may give you the result that you're not looking for. So you want to pay attention to when things are going to run, whether it's because certain actions they need to wait for the result of a previous action, or if the timing is related to just different conditional checks, right? It needs to check for something first before it can move on to pathway A versus pathway B. Timing is a big factor when it comes to creating reliable workflows. There are a few different ways you can control timing. One we've already mentioned, which is to take advantage of the result of previous step number. This isn't always going to be available. It's really only going to be there whenever an action can actually produce a result. But if you see it there, you definitely want to take advantage of it if you need it, because this tells Bubble to wait for that previous step to occur first before it runs this action here. This way Bubble won't try to run both of these actions at the exact same time, okay? Another thing that you can implement is to add pauses into your workflow. So there is, under the navigation category here, adding a pause before the next action that can help control when things run. Now be mindful that this action will only pause visual changes. It's not actually going to pause any actions that relate to modifying the database. So you want to be careful with that. And another way that you can control timing is by leveraging custom events. This is another really great benefit of the event. So for example, let's say that I had another custom event here. We'll say this is step 2, and just for kind of the pattern here, I'm going to create another one called step 3, like this. So from the sign up, we trigger our success, or we'll say that this is, step 1. And then from success, we can trigger our step 2. And then from step 2, let's say we have another series of actions, and then we can trigger step 3. So Bubble will actually honor the order in which these custom events are designed, and that can really help you with the timing of it. Not only that, but you can also create specific delays. So there is a separate action. Instead of a trigger, you can schedule a custom event. So if I don't want to trigger step 3 immediately, I can schedule step 3 to occur after a certain number of seconds of delay. All of these different techniques can give you further control over the overall flow of these actions. Now, I want to take you through a quick example of a common mistake I see folks run into when it comes to running back-to-back actions that cancel each other out. And it can lead to a real head scratcher in terms of how to resolve this. So I'm going to show you here. And this is all related to, concepts around workflow timing. So my user data type has a yes or no field called active. The user is either active or they're not, right? It's a yes or a no. So in my design, we're going to see what the current status is. It's either yes or no, and the button should toggle that value back and forth. If I click on this, it should change it to yes. If I click on it again, it changes it back to no. That's in theory what I want to happen with the workflow I have set up here. But if we go to the preview, I'm clicking on the button, nothing is actually happening. We're not seeing this text change here. And the reason is because of the following. What's happening right now is I'm clicking on the button and I'm running step 1 to change the value from no to yes. You see here when the active is currently no, we're going to change it to yes. But what's happening is that immediately step 2 is now true. It's going to change it back to no, because as a result of step 1, the user's active is yes, and therefore step 2 also runs. So the way that I see folks setting this up is this sort of back-to-back canceling each other out situation, thinking that only one action is going to run at a time because only one condition can be true at a time, when in reality, Bubble is running step 1 and then so fast that step 2 is going to find that its condition is going to be met, and therefore it will be able to run as well. So they both end up running, canceling each other out, and then no change occurs. So the solution here is actually to move these conditional steps into 2 separate workflow events. When I click on make active, as long as the current user's active is currently no, right? Like this is at the event level, then we're going to change the value to yes. And I'm going to remove this condition. I'm going to completely remove this action. This is a standalone flow. Now I'm going to copy this and reverse it so that in a separate flow, it will do the opposite. If the value is currently yes, then we're going to change the value to no. The difference here is that Bubble's actually evaluating the events first, all of these events from the button click, before it can run any of their actions. And that way it actually has a chance to see which scenario do we move forward with and which scenario do we ignore. And that's going to give us the difference that we need. So I'm going to refresh the page here. And now if I click on the button, you see it changes to yes, click on it again. Now my workflows are actually functioning as intended. Where we place our conditions can make a huge difference. There are a couple other things that you can do to stay efficient in your workflow logic. The first is only to trigger what you need when you need it. It's really easy to run actions in excess, especially if those actions contain database searches and other heavier operations that consume more workload units than you want. If you're running things as soon as the page is loaded, or running things every 3 seconds, for example, and if it's not always needed, then you're just being wasteful of your workload units. That can lead to a slower application. It could lead to a more expensive app. So only trigger what you need when you need it. The other thing you can do is to leverage custom states. Custom states allow you to create temporary values. They're not in the database, they just live on the page. But if you can do your calculations and save your values to a custom state, or perform a search and save those search results to a custom state, now you have a dedicated place that you can constantly reference without having to ask Bubble to perform those searches all over again, to perform those calculations all over again. It's a great efficiency tool to take advantage of for your workflows. Okay, I'm going to take you through a quick example here to show you how custom states can really help you reduce the number of times you're performing database searches, which can make a big difference in your workload consumption. What I'm going to do is the user is going to click on this button that says Get User Stats. We're going to see a count of the total number of users in this text here, and we're also going to see these progress bars reflect how many of those users are managers and how many are owners, all from one single custom state and only one search rather than 3 separate searches to get these 3 different metrics here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my state. I'm going to add my state to my settings page here. That's just the name of my page. So I'm going to create a state. I'm opening up the inspector, this element inspector here, creating a new state called list of users. And this state value is going to be the list of my users in my database. Now, I have a very small list of users, in a larger application example, this may not be the most practical way to accomplish this certain feature. In other cases, you may want to just store the counts themselves. So the number of users total, the number of managers, the number of owners, and that way you can manipulate those numbers and do all sorts of calculations, percentages from that. If you have a database of anything, really, in this case I'm using users, that is really large, so let's say in the hundreds, in the thousands, then even a state with that size of a list could slow things down. So be very mindful of the size of your value as well. In my database, I know I currently only have 5 users. This is very lightweight. So that's the list that I have set up here in this custom state. This is a temporary value. And when the user clicks on this button over here, I'm going to add a workflow to set my state value. So element actions, set state, I'm going to go to my page. That's where the state lives. I'm going to click on list of users. This is my custom state, and the value is going to be the result of my search. So I'm searching for all users unconstrained. Okay, so now this result lives in the custom state, and I can reference this custom state 3 separate times from just that one search rather than performing 3 separate searches. So this text here is going to say there are, going to reference my custom state, settings, list of users, count, right? So whatever that number is, I believe right now it's 5. So it'll say there are 5 users. And then here for my progress bar, I can calculate my percentage. So I'm going to go again, settings, my list of users. From here, I can filter those users. We're going to filter where the role, I believe I want the title, not the role here. The title equals, in this case, this is my manager title. I'm going to remove the role constraint just like that. And I'm going to count the number of users and then divide it by, again, we're going to reference the settings list of users count. Okay, so the filtered count divided by the total count, that gives me the percentage of managers. I'm just going to right click, copy this expression, come down into the owner's progress bar and do the same thing, but just swap out the filter here. So this is going to be title equals owner, like that. And these 3 different details that we're going to display here are all coming from one single workflow that sets the value once, like my source that I have here. So let's preview this page. All right, so here, notice that I'm not seeing anything getting calculated yet because I haven't clicked on the button, which is what changes the state value. This is an example of only doing what I need when I need it, right? I'm waiting for the user to actually click the button to perform the search rather than performing it as soon as the page is loaded. So I'm going to click on this button here. We can see immediately 5 users and I can see 0.6%. I actually think this should be 60%. Let's actually change our calculation here. I believe we need to multiply by 100. Bubble is looking for a whole number rather than a decimal. So I'm going to say times 100 there, and we're also going to do times 100 over here. Okay, let's try that one more time just so that we can see an accurate detail here. There we go. So get user stats. There we go. Now we have 60% managers, 40%, and both calculations and this count here are pulling from one single data source that was defined one time, compared to having to do a search twice within this percentage expression here, searching for users and constraining it to count on the constraint, dividing it by another search to do the count. So this would be 2, 4, 5 searches in order to get these details. 5 versus 1 can make a really big difference, depending on other logic that might be happening behind the scenes. So that simple example of leveraging a custom state is something you'll want to keep in mind when you're creating workflows that could be triggering multiple searches. And this, as you can see here, bleeds into your designs, doing searches within your elements and your conditions on your elements as well. You want to make sure that you're in complete control over your workflow logic. This is going to make it easier for you to troubleshoot your own application and to continue growing it reliably. So take advantage of the debugging tool that will help you inspect your workflows. This way you really know it inside and out, can help reveal any timing issues or issues with your conditions. Make sure that you're studying the metrics tab of your editor so that you understand how much workload your workflows are consuming. There could be areas for optimization there. And remember that the available dynamic expressions in the conditions and in mapping fields are often a result of their context. You don't want to be afraid of your workflows. I know they can get a bit intimidating the larger your app gets, but if you get in the habit of truly understanding them inside and out, you'll be in a really great position for scale. All right, I hope this was helpful, and if it was, the content you're about to see on the next screen will help you take things even further.